Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Miguel de Allende. We're located on the grounds of the Chichimeca, the Otomi, and the Nahua peoples. We endeavor to be in community with our indigenous neighbors, as well as members and friends from Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. Whether you're here in person or joining on Zoom, we are welcoming you. We encourage you to bring your entire self, the entirety of your personality. I'm Robin Loving, a member of our Sunday Services team, and it's great to see friends old and new here today. At this point, I'd like to recognize our visitors. So, visitors, I'd like you to stand and stay standing for a second, and we'd like for you to share your name and where you're from. While you're standing, and before Diego gets to you with a microphone, I want to tell our Zoom audience that we'd like for them to put their names and their locations into the chat box so we can welcome them just as warmly. So Diego, take it away. Let's see who we have with us today.
Good morning. My name is Mary Lane, and I'm from First Unitarian Church of Oakland.
Thank you, Mary. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Sandra Sage, and this is my first meeting in this church. I've just moved here from Denver.
Wonderful, Sandra. Welcome, welcome. Afterward, we're going to have coffee. We'd like to talk with you more.
My name is Jan Miller. I belong to Granite Peak Unitarian Church in Prescott, Arizona.
Great. Thank you, Miss Miller.
Judy McAdam in Prescott, Arizona.
Judy, welcome.
I'm Andrew Knox. I moved here this summer, and the last Unitarian church I belonged to was in Santa Barbara, California.
All right, welcome. I think we have one or two more. Yeah, thank you, Diego.
Hi, my name is Andrew Wilson, and just going to be here for 3 months from Sacramento, California.
Sometimes 3 months ends up being a lifetime. Watch out.
Yeah. Good morning. I'm Michelle Brodet. I'm here since 22 years. I came here many times because I have many friends who gave wonderful talks here, and I still have friends. Of course, many wonderful friends, and I'm happy to be here because Dinah Weiner invited me to tell me that today someone from Colonia Guadalupe was going to give a talk, and I just moved to Guadalupe, so I like to come.
Another Guadalupana. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diego, and we welcome everybody. We've got a few announcements for you. The most exciting one is that today we begin a new program for our children aged 7 to 13, and it's called Young Explorers, Jóvenes Exploradores. Guided by Chris Jace and Ann Geyer and their team, our young people will focus on exploring a wide range of values, including compassion, environmental protection, justice, respect, responsibility, and more. This will happen on the first Sunday of every month right here in the back, and it'll happen during the school year between September and May. We invite you to invite all your friends with children to check us out and to enjoy. We also want to say that in this inaugural session, I'm seeing Margot Cumey. Margot, is there something that I need to do here? I asked them to silence their phones. Okay, good. Let's make sure. Okay, today Stan Allen will be their guest presenter at the children's program, and he's going to talk about his work with migrants at Abba House. His specific message will be so that the children can understand that some people are forced to leave their countries, not like us who came willingly and because we wanted to, and that they face dangers en route to places that are safer for them. This free program will accommodate both English and Spanish speakers, and they'll get healthy snacks and be able to do crafts, so it'll be a lot of fun. For more information and to register, please contact Ann Geyer. I've got her email address. I won't go through that with you. You can certainly get that from us afterward, but it is on the screen now for our Zoom folks, and Chris Chase. The final thing that I want to share with you is that the COVID task force has just asked that everybody on our email list watch for an item about a poll about masking here at the Aldea. The poll is mercifully brief. I've already taken it. It took me this long. And it will really help us inform us about future policies here. If you haven't gotten it, please check your junk or your spam. And if you need it, write Dan Newspiel. Again, that number and name, etc., is on our Zoom screen. And we're hoping that you'll ask us afterward if you need it. It's really important that you take a minute to do this, so thanks. Let's see. Okay, finally, you saw on the way in that we have a Help Yourself to Hymnals and Orders of Service today, so I hope you all got a hymnal and an order of service. If not, Margot's in the back to facilitate that for you. Feel free to get up now to get your hymnal, because we've got at least 2 hymns you're going to want to sing, and your order of service, because in the order of service there are lots of other things going on that we'd love for you to know about and participate with us. Our Zoom guests are invited afterward to commune with each other, and all of you are invited afterward to have coffee and cookie with us. But first, we open our ceremony, with Jim and Betsy doing our opening words and lighting our chalice.
We light the chalice today with inspiration from Melanie Davis, a spark of hope. If ever there were a time for a candle in the darkness, this would be it. Using a spark of hope to kindle the flame of love, ignite the light of peace, and feed the flame of justice.
Lovely sentiments, and really important for us. Now I'd like to invite you to join our voices in song to sing hymn number 361, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In. I invite you to stand as you're willing and able, and please watch the screen for words if you don't care to look at the hymnal. We thank you. Thank you. And now I invite you to join together in reciting our fellowship's unique covenant, first in English and then in Spanish with Miguel Angel. We respect the interdependent web of life and work for a just and peaceful world. We encourage the search for truth and meaning, strive for compassion in our relationships, and seek values that will benefit our lives and the lives of others. This is our covenant.
Respetamos todos los estilos de vida dentro de su red interdependiente y trabajamos por un mundo justo y pacífico. Alentamos la búsqueda de la verdad y la comprensión total. Nos esforzamos por mantener compasión en nuestras relaciones y buscamos valores que beneficien nuestras vidas y las vidas de los demás. Este es nuestro convenio.
Gracias, Miguel Ángel. I just love his voice. And now it's my honor to invite Jürgen and Jim up to join us together in our joys and concerns.
Thank you, Robin. Well, it's good to see you all. And I'm a member of the Sunday Service Committee, and I was asked to share the joys and concerns that have come in to Tom during this week for our fellowship. We are a covenantal community. We covenant with one another to embrace the interdependent web of life, working for a just and peaceful world. And as we know, a covenant is a relationship of shared commitment. So in the time when joys are brought to our attention by one of our members, we share and celebrate that joy. And in the same manner, when a sorrow or a concern is shared by someone, we feel a profound sense of identity or empathy with that shared joy, with that shared concern or sorrow. And our ritual of lighting the candle symbolizes the spirit, deeply felt and celebrated by all. Very briefly, for those of you who are joining us on Zoom, if you have a joy or a concern or a sorrow, we invite you to list it in the chat box, and Deanna will give it to me at the conclusion of the joys and concerns that have been pre-sent in to Tom during the week. Our first candle is a candle of joy. Kathy and Dan are about to head up north to New Jersey to be with their children and their 3-year-old granddaughter and their spanking new baby boy who is cute as a button. So they'll be up there for a couple of weeks. It doesn't help when my joys and concerns fall down to my feet. Another joy, a huge joy, is what Robin has already shared with us about the launching today, first time in 2 years, over 2 years, of our young explorers, that's what we're calling them, who will be joining us in the back room. It's it's only 2 today, but it'll grow. We know it'll grow within the next several weeks. And we also give thanks for those volunteers who are giving their time and energy and love for these children. By the way, the beginning of the curriculum, if we can call it that, is going to be an introduction into the 7 principles that guide us as a community. We light another candle of Happy Birthday Week for Adero and Katrina Barron. She looks forward to bringing her kiddies back next month after the family recovers from 2 birthdays during the first week in school. a candle of support and caring for Bob Colt and Christy McGue. Bob continues to undergo aggressive medical treatment in the States, and Christy is by his side supporting us. Christy writes that Bob has made really good progress in the first round of chemotherapy, and now he's home for an entire week before the next round begins. We wish Bob joy during this terrible time of recovering of treatments, but we believe that he's going to get better through chemotherapy. A candle of sorrow for those of you who may have known longtime San Miguel resident Bill Reiner. Gary Belkin informs us that Bill died this week. Although Bill was not a member of the fellowship, because he was a longtime resident of San Miguel, many of you may have known Bill. Another candle of sorrow felt by a number of us, particularly on this Labor Day weekend, is lit for the passing of Barbara Ehrenreich. She was a gifted journalist and a fighter for workers' rights. Probably her best-known book was Nickeled and Dimed, where she examined the ongoing plight of the working poor in the US. She just died this week at the age of 81. Her son Ben tells us that she didn't think too much about thoughts and prayers, but if you want to honor her memory, he says, then love each other and fight like hell. We light our next candle of deep concern for the real and present spiritual crisis, i.e., the fracturing of democracy brewing within the entire US population, which, by the way, stirs deep concerns around the world. To which the president gave a bold, unvarnished speech on the steps of Liberty Hall in Philadelphia just a couple of days ago under the banner, "Fighting for the Soul of Our Nation." I'm sure many of you saw that speech. And I, for one, felt, I'm proud of my president. I'm not exactly a Biden fan, but I thought he did an extremely good job in that speech and a very timely delivery. We light a candle of cautious gratefulness for the two principal sides of the Ukrainian war, who together with the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, came to an agreement to not only let the IAEA members inspect this extraordinarily large nuclear plant in the midst of the war zone in Ukraine, but also to allow members to remain to ensure that continuing safe operation will go on. And while we're on the subject of the war in Ukraine, we light our special candle as long as this terrible war lasts. We light it in profound concern for the thousands of people who have lost their lives, or who have been maimed, or who have been upended, whose lives have been upended as a result of this terrible war. And that's not all. While we are thinking about this horrible war, let us not forget the many other points of conflict around our cherished world. And I will give voice to just a few of them. The devastating floods in Pakistan that have caused about 20 million people to be in chaos and scrambling for their survival. the continuing influx of people whose worth and dignity is denied them, fleeing their homeland in Central America in desperate pursuit of a dream of life in a land far away, not often friendly toward them. The renewed conflict between the Tigray and the Eritrean peoples, resulting in a vast humanitarian crisis that's unfathomable for us. And the very real threat of genocide of the Chinese government against the Uyghurs people. Diana, are there any joys and concerns that have come in the chat box? None. Okay, thank you. So finally, we light this candle for the unspoken joys, sorrows, or concerns that remain unspoken but lie deeply within our hearts. May the candle burn brightly. Thank you, Jim, for helping.
You gonna do part 2 for us? No? Oh, that's a little later, isn't it? Sorry. I got a little ahead of myself. Okay, just a moment. Some of these pages that fell down might have been mine. Okay, Diego, is it time for our musical interlude, Step by Step? All right, let's have that.
Step by step, the longest march can be won, can be won. Many stones can form and arch, singly none, singly none. And by union, what we will can be accomplished still. Drops of water turn a mill, singly none, singly none. Step by step, the longest march can be won, can be won. Many stones can form an arch, singly none, singly none. And by union, what we will can be accomplished still. Drops of water turn the mill, singly none, singly none.
Good morning. I'm Lee Knox, a member of the Sunday Service Committee, and I want to tell you about the work of this fellowship. We offer you a place to gather, whether live or virtually, to learn something new, or maybe to understand something in a new way. A place to meet new people and to celebrate life with old friends. A safe place to embark on a spiritual journey or to continue your search for truth and meaning. Our Sunday services are just part of who we are. We have weekly, monthly, and seasonal activities and programs that are fun and enlightening and bring you closer to the community which surrounds us. And since this fellowship's founding over 30 years ago, we have given roughly half of our income and pledges each year to local nonprofit organizations that provide health, educational, and environmental services for the underserved communities in the San Miguel area. We do this through a grant program that is administered by our Social Action Committee. It's something we are very proud of. With that in mind, the offering for the work of our fellowship, which includes the grants to nonprofits, will now be collected and most gratefully received.
You know, I woke up this morning and the first thought was, for the love of labor. You know, that's what today's presentation is about. And if you don't think you have a love for labor, you just think about who made your clothes, who built your house, and who paves our streets. We're all beholden to labor for the comfort and ease of our daily lives, because without it, we'd all be slaves to ourselves rather than having the good grace of being able to be good to each other. So this morning's presentation, which correlates to at least 4 of our 7 principles, is pertinent to each of us. Our guest presenter today is Kate Poe, who will be joining us live from Mexico City, although she lives here in Guadalupe. I've had the pleasure of knowing her through Colonia Guadalupe for many years. She is going to be speaking today about celebrating a new day for workers' rights in Mexico. Kate is especially qualified to share these things with us today because she spent more than 3 decades working on union representation for almost every kind of work and worker. Manufacturing plants, janitors, healthcare workers, university employees, construction workers, strawberry pickers, and telephone operators. In fact, she was the director of the New Jersey AFL-CIO at one time. Kate experienced firsthand what happens to workers when they come together and join their voices to get a job done. She wasn't working directly with workers, but when she wasn't supporting workers, she was building support from faith-based organizations like ours, from elected officials, from immigrants' rights organizations and community groups, which are critical in an era when management prevents workers from exercising their rights. UUs, following the strong values and moral principles, were among the most active supporters of many of these organizing campaigns. When Kate moved to town in 2013, a colleague asked her if she were here to come organize the hotel workers and the restaurant employees. She didn't move here for that, but she did apply her passion, as we heard a little bit earlier, to organizing the work of Por Amor a la Guadalupe, a neighborhood association. Woo, this just touches my heart. Best known for feeding 187 Colonia Guadalupe families during the pandemic. As UUs, we have long believed that challenging inequity locally and globally is our moral imperative. And as a pragmatic faith, we are committed to working to change economic and social systems with equitable outcomes for life, dignity, and the well-being of us all. It's my pleasure to know Kate, to work with her, and to watch the amazing results that she has had in our Colonia, my previous Colonia. So please help me welcome Kate Poe.
Thank you, Robin. I'm unmuted, right? Okay. And thank you, hi, Paula. And thank you all for inviting me once again to speak with you. You know, the last time I was at this service, it was to talk about the work in Colonia Guadalupe. And, you know, there were a lot of challenges there. We have an ongoing organization of 27 street reps, all of them Spanish speaking, all of them longtime Mexican residents, but all, you know, English speakers are part of this network too. And through this ongoing work, we address all kinds of day-to-day issues like, you know, street lights and lost dogs and, you know, what's going on with street art in our neighborhood. But we also were in a position, as Robin mentioned, when the pandemic hit, to set up an ongoing food distribution. And this work continues today. We're continuing to feed families in the neighborhood. It's not always been easy in Colonia Guadalupe to bridge all the divides that happen, their cultural, their language divides, their economic divides. But compared to union organizing in a neighborhood in San Miguel de Allende has been a piece of cake. Nobody gets fired from their job. Nobody gets threatened. People don't get kicked out of their houses. They don't get deported. And unfortunately, in my long time of organizing work in the United States, I saw all those things happen to workers. So today, though, I'm not going to talk so much about community organizing, except to the extent that it relates to congregations. And I was a congregation-based organizer for many years. but much more about what it means when you organize a union. And what that means is really giving workers a voice on the job. As we're in a very exciting time, though, both in terms of Mexico and the United States. And I'm going to apologize just right off the bat. My reference point is the US. I know you've got Canadians in your ranks, and your laws have always been the envy of us organizers in the US. But most of what I'll talk about today is in relation to Mexico and the United States. This past year, though, I hope you've seen some of these, there have been very exciting victories. The 8,000 warehouse workers at Amazon in Staten Island, New York, voted for a union after, we watched defeats all over the country. Now, that union didn't come out of nowhere. Christian Smalls, the young man who organized that, his mother was a longtime activist in the healthcare union, 1199 in New York. And, it was looking bad. I mean, they still have a lot of work to do, but as usual, Amazon filed all these charges to block them from getting a union. And just on Friday, Christian tweeted that the National Labor Relations Board has thrown out all the objections from Amazon, and they're going to be able to move forward. Now, I mention that because that would not have happened under the Trump administration. It really matters that you have the outside structures that can weigh in to support unions. You've also in the U.S. seen, we've got over 200 Starbucks locations that have organized. So if you were in the United States this weekend, I might be telling you, go find the union Starbucks because they're organizing sip-ins. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but it's, you show up and order coffee and let all the workers know you're behind them. Or Trader Joe's workers. I called up a friend, longtime labor friend of mine, and she was talking about the really exciting dynamic here, that there are a lot of young people who in the past, would have said, oh, you just take this job and I'm going to go get something else. But instead of doing that, they're realizing that it's a much bigger fight. They're deciding to just stay put, take a stand, and fight for a union. That's what we're seeing. Labor movement observers in the US are calling this the biggest wave of union organizing since the 1930s. I think some of the photos that were in that song I was watching were from Macy's, did you see, and Woolworths. When people sat down at the auto plants in the 30s, suddenly people were getting calls from Macy's, and people were sitting down and calling the union up and saying, okay, what do we do next? It was a very exciting wave then. But in Mexico, which I also want to focus on, the incredible thing that has happened is that we have new labor laws, and a friend of mine helped me read about these, that give new transparency and rights to workers here. I looked at, some of what the anti-union side is saying about this, and they are pretty freaked out. A consultant from Jackson Lewis, which I was constantly up against in campaigns because they get hired to help employers defeat unions. They recently warned US corporations who have companies here that these reforms will bring more democratic unions, but also more labor strife, union organizing campaigns, and tougher negotiations, much like those in the United States. Now, very interesting for us in San Miguel is that the first test of these labor laws just happened up the road from us in that big GM plant in Silao. I imagine many of you, when you go to the airport, you drive past it, but I'll go into more details about that. But what I want to talk a little bit about is the kind of war on workers that go on, because I more and more realize that unless you've been in one of these fights and actually organized a union, people just have no idea how bad it normally is. So as Robin mentioned, I was involved for about 3 decades in a whole range of union organizing campaigns, many of these involving thousands of workers. I even first ran into strawberry pickers from Guanajuato up in Watsonville. you know, and I had to sort of deal with the fact that their idea of a union was very different than ours. Robin mentioned my friend who said, well, what, did you move to San Miguel to organize the hotels and the restaurant workers? And I told him, no, you're out of your mind. I mean, A, it's time to retire. But more importantly, in Mexico, if you are involved in organizing a union, never mind as a extranjero like me, you risk being beat up, deported, you know, or even worse. In the US, though, the minute people start talking union on the job or complaining, they risk also being fired. It happens all the time. And people say to me, well, isn't that illegal for somebody to fire somebody for wanting a union? Yes, it's illegal. But employers are told to do this all the time. And how it works is you fire the troublemakers early on, and it takes 2 years to get them rehired and get them their back pay. And meanwhile, you've had a chilling effect on everybody in the workplace because they can see that it's really not worth speaking up. What this means is that people like me and rank and file workers spend months, if not years, having to put together secret committees where, you know, you can't let the word get back to the boss that you're talking about a union, because if you do that, you're immediately going to be fired. So you build these committees, try to cover secretly every part of a workplace, and then you finally surface at the point when there are too many of you to get fired. I mean, that is the only way it works, because otherwise everybody gets fired. The only response to this, and the other part of what happens is once the union surfaces, it's this steady thing where workers get hauled in on a daily basis to captive audience meetings. They get told that unions are corrupt, that all they want is your dues, that they're these third-party organizations, that they're going to lose everything they have, that we're all one big family. And individual workers get called in to, they get called in by their supervisors. You pull out a personnel file and you go, oh, I see, your 7-year-old daughter gets sick and we usually let you, leave early to go pick her up, but that's going away if you get a union. Or look here, you were late 3 times. If you get a union, we're not going to look the other way. You're going to be fired. And the only response to this, because the effort is to say the union will not be able to defend you, and the union is some outside organization that's going to come in between you and the company imposing. The only response is to build a very strong rank and file committee of worker leaders that can show everybody, no, the union is us. The union is your coworkers. I want to compare this to what would we see in a normal election in the US or Canada. And imagine if you were running for office and the candidate you were up against, the incumbent, had 40 hours a week, unlimited access to all the voters, and you had to stand at the Canadian border and pass out leaflets. I mean, that really is what we're talking about this. Lastly, a big piece of these campaigns in the US, and it's been a threat that says, okay, if you all vote for a union, we're moving someplace where people will be grateful. We're moving to Mexico. That threat has been very hard to counteract because we've seen a hemorrhaging of jobs for years. So part of the strategy that Canadian and US unions took on this was, a legislative strategy to try to get a trade agreement that would give workers in Mexico some rights. Because, how do you compete with a place where, have you guys looked at the daily minimum wage in Mexico lately? The AMLO, it just went up 23%, but as of this year, the daily minimum that a worker can be paid is 173 pesos a day. Okay, that means about, I just wrote it down, $8.66 a day. How do workers in the US hold on to their jobs if there's any chance to move that work to Mexico? I mean, it's just impossible. What happened in 1994 was NAFTA. You've probably heard about that, the North American Free Trade Agreement. But unfortunately, it had no protections for workers here. I mean, when Bill Clinton signed this, it was like, I don't know, he was saying it was going to create a new economic order, protect the environment. He said be the possibility of greater world peace. But those of us in labor knew that wasn't the story. Because instead, for 26 years, we got the opposite in the US and Canada: stagnant wages, increasing inequality, and weakened social protections in all three countries. So what we had in Mexico were unions, but what we call company unions, because they were completely dominated by management. Let me read again from a report to employers. For at least 50 years, a company in Mexico could recognize a union, sign a contract without any input or approval from workers. These were called protection agreements. And as a result, while foreign and direct investment in Mexico skyrocketed, all the wages remained really low. The unions were just in name only, and they were a handful of independent unions, some in mining and airline. So General Motors opened its plant in Silao just a couple years after NAFTA in 1996. What was it like, has it been like to work there? First, until this year, they were paying workers $2 an hour. In comparison, GM's Fort Wayne, Indiana assembly, which makes the exact same trucks, were earning $18 to $32 an hour. Workers were putting in shifts of 12 hours a day, 4 days a week. Many had a 14 or 15-hour workday because of their long commutes. They were allowed 1.5 hour break during that entire shift to use the bathroom, eat lunch, and drink water. The work at the plant was physically taxing, a lot of injuries. Mostly they would not be investigated. And when workers spoke up about these conditions, they'd be fired and put on a blacklist. They could never be rehired in the auto industry. So what happened? Pro-employer publications call this a perfect storm for labor reform. In 2018, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, AMLO, was elected, and his party, Morena, won control of Congress. They had campaigned on a progressive labor platform with greater employee rights. Simultaneously in the US, there were demands as a part of the renegotiation of NAFTA. And, you know, President Trump criticized Mexico's labor practices as unfairly undercutting American labor. So there was amazingly, some Republican and Democratic party agreement on this. Speaker Nancy Pelosi threatened to withhold support until Mexico passed and implemented the labor laws. And US negotiators insisted that they phase out all the company unions, require secret ballots, transparent negotiations, and contract approvals, and that Mexico set up an independent labor adjustment board that would provide free information to union members about their rights, and they could get copies of their contracts. This all took effect July 1st, 2020. Now, you can imagine a lot of this requires, you know, those agencies work well. In April 2019, a group of workers in Silao went on strike to support workers in the US, and they used these laws to get rid of their union in 2021. I mean, there was an effort by the company union to steal the election, but the US trade representative intervened. And in February of this year, with observers from the World Labor Organization and the National Institute, 78% of those workers voted out the old union. Their new contract signed in June was the first major raise for unionized workers in Mexico since the approval of USMCA. They initially pressed for 19.2% increase, with General Motors offering 3.2%, and what they ended up was a 13.8% increase with 8.5% in wage hikes, 14% increase in food vouchers, a production increase, Christmas Eve off. They now have what is known as the Bajío Worker Center, Casa Obrero del Bajío. They're getting calls from all over Mexico. And the president of their new union, Maria Alejandra Morales Reynosa, a 33-year-old single mother who's worked for GM for 12 years, has been the first woman to be elected Secretary General of an automotive union in Mexico. She just recently, by the way, got an award from the Nelson Mandela Award from a Canadian workers in British Columbia, Canada. So what does this mean for the Unitarian Fellowship? It's not an easy question because, there's not a tradition of congregations supporting worker justice fights, at least not a recent one. But these workers at Silao have been courageous. They've had to have a lot of international support. I suspect they're going to be turning to elected officials and community groups in the time ahead. We'll just have to watch. In the meantime, though, I want to ask all of us to reflect on some of the UU principles and documents that really show your proud tradition of supporting workers' rights. Robin shared with me language from your 1997 General Assembly that talked about fair wages, benefits, access to adequate housing, as well as environmental and occupational hazards. But what I found truly inspiring was something else from that 1997 document that just fits with my principles. Let me read it to you. As Unitarian Universalists, we have a religious and moral obligation to challenge complacency in ourselves and in our communities. We commit to fighting injustice wherever we find it. We acknowledge that this may disturb our own comfort and require us to broaden our interests to include the greater good of an economically just and compassionate community. We will learn much as we do this work. Historically, Unitarians and Universalists have been in the forefront of social reform. Our history teaches that social change does not come easily, is not without risk. Nevertheless, at the beginning of this new century, let us recommit to justice, equity, compassion, and human relations. Let us embrace our responsibility to help create a more just world, to reflect and organize for action within our congregations and beyond our doors. Let us not concede that economic injustice, poverty, and racism are tolerable. Thank you for giving me this powerful reminder, a chance to reconnect with my labor roots. Happy Labor Day. And as Barbara Ehrenreich says to all of us, let's all love each other and fight like hell. Thank you so much.
Whew. I want to thank Kate for, of course, reminding about our history, important information, the intersection of our values with what's important to us for a better world today. And I want her to know that, we've got 1/3 more people in our actual pews today than normal. So Kate's message was a big draw for us, and we're grateful that you're all here. And now I invite you to join your voices in song for hymn 109 as we come marching, marching. Stand as you're willing and able, please, and the lyrics will appear on your screen.
As we go marching, marching in the beauty of the day, 1,000,000 darkened kitchens, 1,000 mill lofts gray are touched with all the radiance that a sudden sun discloses. For the people hear us singing, bread and roses, bread and roses. As we go marching, marching, we battle to for men. For they are women's children, and we mother them again. Our lives shall not be sweated from birth until life closes. Hearts starve as well as bodies. Give us bread, but give us roses. As we go marching, marching, unnumbered women dead go crying through our singing their ancient call for bread. Small art and love and beauty, their drudging spirits new. Yes, it is bread we fight for, but we fight for roses too. As we go marching, marching, we bring the greater days. The rising of the women means the rising of the race. No more the drudge and idler, in that toil where one reposes, but a sharing of life's glories, bread and roses, bread and roses.
We extinguish the flame of the chalice with words of Laurel and Bellamy. If you have found freedom, take it with you into the world. If you have found comfort, go and share it with others. If you have dreams, help one another that they may come true. If you have known love, give some back to a bruised and hurting world. Go in peace.